Good morning and welcome to another day four with the man Frank Scalish. It is a suns out, buns out July. The bass are breaching, and Uncle Frank is here teaching.
Uh-oh.
It's all about frogs today, Uncle Frank. I've been waiting for this show for a year and a half.
You made a rhyme, dude.
I did.
Outstanding. I'm cranking up my volume a little bit here.
All right. Recorded show today, July 6th. Hopefully we all had a healthy and happy 4th of July
and
weekend.
Safe 4th
and we are back. And there's nothing more American than 60-pound braid, a heavy action rod, and a largemouth just destroying a frog on topwater.
Yeah, come on. I mean, you know what? I have a problem when I fish hollow-bodied frogs and solid-bodied frogs. I grip my teeth when I'm fishing them.
Clench the jaw.
I clench my jaw, and at the end of the day, I'm like swollen and sore because every time you throw that thing out there, you got that anticipation of, you know what I mean? So I have
a mouth guard.
I do. I need a mouth guard. See, who said this isn't a real sport?
Did you ever? I feel like I'm not aging you, but I feel like you might have played sports in a time before they realized what the traumatic brain injury was.
That's very factual.
Yeah, because I had to do the molded mouth guard for hockey, and you get a penalty if it was dangling outside of the mask.
We didn't have the molded ones. We got the molded ones. I was probably a teen, teen
when you'd put them in the boiling water, and then suck on them and get it right in the shape of your teeth.
Yeah. That was such a fun project.
It was
on so many levels.
I always got the bubblegum flavored ones.
I just got the clear, plain, put the plastisol in your mouth and bite down on it.
So you are thinking we need a signature series Uncle Frank frog fishing mouth guard. It just says day 4 right there, right?
It's perfect. It's perfect. And then, okay, they'll be out soon. They will be out soon. So, 4th of July. Hopefully everybody's safe, happy, and had fun.
Were you a big, or are you a big fireworks guy, like home fireworks guy? I know where you live now probably it would be frowned upon should you put a big fireworks display on.
It would, not only would it be frowned upon, but you'd have a mugshot of me.
You would go to jail.
Be day 4. I'd be in. How do you like my stripes? Or blaze orange with.
Have you ever done that? Because I never have.
Oh, yeah.
I have never.
Yeah.
I mean, the most I've done is the sparklers and the ones that go. But I've never been a pyrotechnics type of guy.
Oh, we when I was a little bit younger, we were dangerous.
I could only imagine.
Yeah, it was out of control. Well, you should never. I can't even say it. Never mind.
Why not?
You should never mix adult beverages with things that explode.
Is this when you were a kid?
Yes.
You were drinking adult beverages and doing fireworks as a child.
Yeah, it was bad. We were a little more of a freewheeling society back then.
I hear you.
And most of the time you were let to grow up. You learn by your stupidity, supposedly, right?
I could just see a hammered 14-year-old Frank Scalish with a handful of firecrackers,
with a big old cigar hanging out of your mouth,
running around at dusk, just waiting to wreak havoc.
Oh yeah, it was bad. We did bad things with fireworks.
Oh my gosh! Oh, the back of whatever gland that is at the base of my head is hurting. I've been laughing for 4.5 minutes straight now. But yes, that is a frog show today. We have illustrations. We're going to go through a number of the different types of frogs. But first, in our pre-production meeting, you said that we have a small crisis, a day 4 crisis that some of the listeners have been bringing to your attention, and you think it's time for a refresher course.
Yeah, I am. I get a lot of DMs from guys that send me pictures of vegetation to identify for them. The biggest confusion is among Elodia, hydrilla, milfoil, and coontail. So I'm going to show you guys, and we'll get into this later on in the show, but I have diagrams. I'm going to show you the absolute foolproof, bulletproof way to tell what the grass is. I have a really good buddy of mine who is a fantastic fisherman, and he is still having issues identifying grass. So I decided that since we were talking about frogs and frogs, play in the grass,
Mhm.
that it would be a perfect opportunity to get into that, and we're going to get into that. But first, we're going to dive into frogs.
Okay.
So when people say frogs, okay, they could be referring to the hollow body style frogs or the solid plastisol bodied frogs, like the plastic worms are made out of. So
Buzz
um
toad, the top
yeah,
toad, that type of deal.
right, the tip toad, buzz toad, horny toad, or your hollow body frogs like the pad crasher, pop and pad crasher, um, Spro's frogs, anybody's frogs. Hollow bodies are a type, solid bodies are another type. So um, let's address hollow bodies first. Um, this is, I call this the standard hollow bodied frog. Okay, it has more of a pointed snoot to it. This is a pad crasher. Um, I really like the pad crasher a lot. In fact, to be honest with you, it's the only frog I own. Hollow body. The hook angles are perfect uh, for solid hookups. It's got a V belly, almost like a bass boat, and it walks the dog really easy. You can get this bait walking just by twitching the rod. You could speed it up. It's almost like a Super Spook Junior.
Mhm.
That's how good it walks. The other style of hollow body is the poppin' frog. This is the poppin' pad crasher. So it has a concave mouth. It's not pointed like the
Like a
standard.
popar.
It's like a popar mouth. Yeah. And so we'll get into a little bit on when and how to fish each one, and then of course you've got your solid bodied frogs like the yum tip toad. Now, if you look at the tip toad, it's nice and narrow. It's got a nice flat body. It rides on the water really easily. It's got large paddles on the legs, so this gurgles. All right, you got to remember that this gurgles. It makes a deeper sound, and then you've got the horny toad style with the tight, tiny,
Mhm.
you know, little feet that makes a little tiny like prop
A pitter
noise.
patter.
Yeah, pitter patter, perfect. So these are the two styles of solid body
Mhm.
frogs you got. All right. So when when you're this leads me to like a pretty good question is when you fish which one.
Right.
Pretty much. So I'm going to go standard pad crasher first, pointy nose, hollow body. I love to fish this with emergent vegetation. That's weeds that grow above the water level. So anytime you have, sparse grass above the water level, um, this is a great bait. Spatter dock. Spatter dock is a lily pad shaped like an arrowroot that grows up out of the water. Most people just call them lily pads. They have big yellow flowers on them, and essentially they're a lily pad, but the leaf actually comes out of the water. The hollow bodies are nice for this stuff because you could walk it underneath and in between and around all the stalks. Um, that's that's a really this is a really good application. That there it is right there. Perfect. And so then you could go, gator grass and pikeweed. Pikeweed grows above the surface. Gator grass grows above the surface, and it also has, a lot of entanglements below the surface. Um, that's pretty much what I like to do with this. I walk the dog around that stuff. I keep it moving. You can do other things with this bait too. Like I call it hopping it like a frog. So instead of me twitching the rod tip to make it walk left and right, I I pull the rod tip straight at it and it bounces up and down. So the frog actually goes like that on the water. Instead of dog style, it bounces up and down.
Yep.
Okay, so now the other thing
Porpoises. I call that porpoising.
yeah,
Where it's like,
porpoises. It just
yep.
it's deadly. It's a deadly technique. So then and then of course I like to fish the pointy nose on the mats. But here's the thing with mat fishing. Um, Mat fishing, I'm looking for broken mats. I'm looking for parts of the mat that is yellow and cheesy looking, and then it peters out, and some of the vegetation is just underneath the surface of the water, maybe laying on it loosely. It's not a solid, full blown mat. Um, you could throw this thing on top of the mat, and then you're gonna hop it so it porpoises, because then it pats down on the mat and goes tick, 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 tick when it's hitting the mat. This will bring bass up through the mat for it. So you could walk the dog on it too. If you got enough water on the mat, you can walk the dog. If there's not enough water, it isn't going to walk. It's just going to tumble. That's
So
just
you're
how it
looking for
works.
something like this, Frank. You're looking
Right.
for a mat that has opening little light
Perfect.
spots in it, that has
Right.
thick vegetation that provides shade, but
Right.
then
So
also
right. So if you see the cheesy spot to the right of your, right there, no, right there. Okay. So you see the high yellow stuff, and then in front of that, you see the broken water. That's the money spot. That's where you're going to get the bass. It's easy for them to get through the mat. They're using the heavy cover mat to ambush, and they're coming out and they're running this frog down. This is what happens when you're fishing that stuff. Sometimes you'll see the V weight come from 3 feet away to get that frog, because the bass are hiding in the thick stuff and they're taking them when they can get them easy in the open areas. Okay, so now let's go to the popping frog, because this is another it's not tricky, but I fish the popping frog a little bit differently. So I'm liking this when the grass is just underneath the surface and there's small patches of grass on top. So basically it'll look like some big puzzle piece. There'll be patches and open
mhm.
water and patches. So then I can pop this and walk it in the open patches, and then hop it across the tighter patches. And then the other thing I like to do with this thing is I like to fish this around wood,
Okay.
blowdowns, docks, man-made cover, stuff like that, because now I can work it in a couple of different ways. I can work it like almost like a popar, but I can still work it like a frog. So if you've got blowdowns that are surrounded by grass, that's money. I'll just pitch this right into the blowdown. Not even make a super long cast, just pitch it right underneath there and go, you know what I mean? And just
Mhm.
because it'll stay put for you, it'll bounce back. If you pop it, it'll pop forward and bounce back. So it's really good. It lends itself really well to that. Of course, boat docks that are surrounded by grass, etc. And you could fish both of these in the same situations, but I prefer the popping frog when I have a lot of room to work the frog, because then I
Mhm.
can double it up as almost like a popper style bait. Um,
I remember Rojas one time at Oneida when that Poppin' Frog style just came out. He was working it real slow along the edges of the pencil reeds and grass where it would come out. And it was the first time, instead of casting it up onto the mats and do, he was working it in that open water,
yep.
spraying water and getting those largemouth to come out and ambush it.
Right, because it's a perfect bait for fishing around man-made
Hmm.
cover, any kind of wall, any kind of wall like a bulrush wall, a reed wall. You can get right on the outside edge and you can literally parallel it. And it's deadly that way. It'll really call the fish out that are buried up in that stuff, it'll call them out to come and get it. It's not as subtle as the pointy nose frog. In my opinion, this is a more subtle bait, even though you're fishing it much quicker than you would this bait. And then of course now we got to get into the toad style baits. But before we do the toad style baits, this is where we're going to clear up some of the vegetation issues. So the first thing I'm going to do, I have a few illustrations here, and I'm going to try to
because where you're going to throw what and when is important, because some of the grass chokes out to the bottom, so you need to be casting in the holes because the fish are that. Some of the grass is going to mat underneath it, so that's where you're going to throw it on the top. Some is going to create hard edges, so you have to understand what each grass and how it behaves and how it grows to understand where the fish are positioned around it. Right, you don't want to be throwing into the middle of something that's completely choked out top to bottom. Right, and you don't want to be fishing the edge out of something that's completely hollow underneath, where the bass are way up underneath it.
That's an absolute correct. And then you have to know your different grass fit types, because bass will show a preference to certain types of vegetation at certain times. And that is the pattern within the pattern when you're grass fishing. For example, I talk about having two types of grass together a lot in a lot of the grass shows we talk about. This is where knowing what you're looking at is important, because I have had instances where bass wanted milfoil and nothing but the milfoil. And then conversely, they wanted coontail and nothing but the coontail. So you have to understand this, because when you're ripping down a lake full of vegetation, identifying the vegetation could narrow your search down when you figure out what type of grass they want to be in. So now you could see you might have a mile long patch of hydrilla and a 25-yard patch of hydrilla, and I mean of milfoil, and know that if they're going into the milfoil, that 20-yard patch is probably a money spot. So you have to, this is why this is going to be important. So I'm going to do this. It's not going to take long, but I'm going to do this anyway. So the first thing I want to address is coontail. And the reason that they call it coontail is because as the stalks get to the surface and get tighter, okay, they're fluffy looking and they look like a raccoon tail. All right. So this is a strand of coontail right here. This is a strand of coontail. Now, if you were to cut this little section out right here,
a cross section,
and look at it, this centerpiece being the stalk, and then these being the filaments or leaves that come off the stalk. So that's what coontail looks like. Basically, it looks like a single strand with split ends on it.
I would call that a weak snowflake.
It's a very weak snowflake, but essentially, so this is what you're looking at, coontail. So if you get this big fluffy ball of grass, you can't just tell what it is. Get it, cut it at a section and look at it from the top, and that's what it'll look like. Now, milfoil, and this is crazy because everybody confuses these two grasses. So now milfoil, all right? This is milfoil. So essentially, in the water, that's going to look very similar. But here's the cross section right here. So basically, milfoil looks like it has feathers on it, not a single strand, but it looks like they're little feathers that go around
on each of the leaves.
Each of those, yes.
Or each, I don't know what that's called, but each of the stalks off of it.
So that's milfoil. So if you look at the two together, I'll just show you the cross sections. Can you see that? Because I can't see it.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So you could see the difference very easily by looking at them together. So that's how you're going to know what you're looking at. Now, the next one would be hydrilla. Where did my hydrilla go?
Oh, you showed it to me before the show.
I got it.
Impressive.
I got it. Okay, so the next one is hydrilla. So hydrilla grows as a single strand up. It's a very hardy, very strong grass. This stuff mats like nobody's business, but this stuff has big caverns and caves underneath the mat. So if you were to take a cross section of this, you're going to see that it has 4 to 8 leaves on it that go around the stalk. and they're little leaves, and there's usually 4 to 8. Now there's a common grass called Elodia, and Elodia looks exactly like Hydrilla, exactly, except Elodia only has 3 leaves on it. So if you look at the two, it's easy to see the difference between them if you take a cross section of it. So that, oops, where am I at? There it is. It's easy to see the difference between Elodia and Hydrilla if you're taking a cross section of it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what you have to do with all your vegetations. You gotta, there's an easy way to do it, and that's to look at the cross section, and then you're not going to get confused by it. Yeah, see, that's perfect. Then you won't get confused by it. So now what we're going to do, and if here, you know what, I did something. I was doing some research. There's an article that was in Bassmasters December 19th, 2020. It's called How to ID Grass and Fish It Effectively. So in that article, you can get it online, and they have tons of different types of vegetation, way more than the 4 I just covered. Tons of it, emergent, submergent, all kinds. It's a great refresher course on. There it is. That's it.
Sometimes I'm good.
You are always good, dude.
It's all the different types of grass.
Right. It's a very good article to get you familiar with some of the vegetation that may be in your area or maybe on lakes that you're going to. So it's a very good article to look into.
Holy cow, this thing is in depth.
Oh yeah, that's 100%. That is.
It just goes and goes and goes.
It does, and it's actually, I do a lot of research on grasses, and this was very in depth and covered a massive wide range of grasses, even stuff that we don't have up here, but that I would encounter in Florida or somewhere else. So I, you know, it's always good to refresh yourself on that, because there's a lot of invasive species now that are coming into play, and so they're a little tougher to recognize, because some of them, they almost are chameleon like. They almost look like some of our native grasses. So all right, so anyway, so we got to get back to the solid bodied frog. So I'll throw this frog when the grass is at the surface, just below the surface, because I want the maximum buzzing sound that I can get from these legs. They won't buzz on mats. There has to be some type of water on top of it for the legs to work properly. So I'm fishing this any place the grass is broken, anywhere the mats are petering out and starting to get water on top of them, or if you have a heavy rain and the water level rises, and a lot of the mats don't rise with the water. Some do, some don't. Money. I like to do, if I have solid mat edges, I'll parallel them with the buzz type frogs. I'll parallel them. So I keep the frog in the water most of the time, and then when you've got fingers of the mat sticking out, I just run them right over it. The other thing I like to do is parallel riprap, parallel concrete walls.
Non-traditional.
Pretty much anywhere you throw a buzz bait. I like to throw these type of frogs, because you're always keeping them moving, and then they just lend themselves really well to that. So now I have some tricks with these frogs that I'm going to show you. And I left my little nail weights. I left my nail weights downstairs, but I don't need the nail weights to show you this first part. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to untangle it here.
All right. You
So
actually have one of these
yeah,
buzz style frogs rigged on. I'm assuming that's your Powell rod.
yes, it's a Powell 764.
Sunline braid.
Right, Sunline braid 764. Now here's the deal, okay? Um, I'm using the regular toad style hook with the screw lock on it.
Yep.
All
So
right.
that's what, a 4/0?
Yeah, that's a 4/0. Now the reason I chose that is because on these baits, I want that hook in the very back end of the frog. So I want the hook far back on the frog. So when the bass comes up and gets it, and then he's going to turn with it,
Yep.
I can
He's
get a
got him.
good hook in him. So now that we got that done, and I keep it right in the center of the frog, this helps the frog run true and straight. Now the other thing I do is I'll add a 16th ounce or a 32nd ounce bullet weight on the nose, and here we go, a bobber stop. So that's my solid body frog setup right there. Now I'm going to tell you why I do this. One, it gives me a little bit of weight on the frog. So it wants to run truer. You can wrap some lead tape around the hook shank too to keep it keeling properly. But the reason I like it on the nose, because sometimes it will roll over on you. All of these frogs will do that from time to time. But the reason I like it on the nose, this is my killing it trick. So I'll be buzzing it across the top. It's doing its thing. The legs are kicking, doing its thing, and one smokes on it and misses it. I kill the frog immediately, and it glides down in a circle with that light weight on it. So that frog, the minute I kill it, that frog starts to nose down like that. 9 out of 10 times that bass comes back and annihilates it.
I caught him on the
So
Red River doing that last year, Frank, in the open. Had a 16th ounce in front of it. They would blow up. They would miss it, and I just stop it, and they'd come back. That's how I caught a lot of them the first day when I actually caught some.
100%. So that's this. It's a money trick with these things. Yeah. So here's the thing. So I was on the Detroit River. I was doing a gig for OSI, my sponsors at the time. Had some guys out. They wanted to do some largemouth fishing. So we were actually fishing this thing on eelgrass edges. Okay. And we'd cast out on the eelgrass edge. There was current because we were in the river proper. So there was pretty good current going. The bait would swing. Once you'd start to get off that eelgrass, the bait would swing. A lot of times them bass were coming up and missing it. And I would kill the frog and it would go down. And then I would see a flash on it or my line would get tight. And then I'd crack them. And so I was teaching these guys how to not set the hook when the frog blows up on it. You have to just keep reeling it until your line starts to get tight. Once your line starts to get tight, then hit the fish. If you set up both hollow body and solid bodied frogs, if you visually hook set, you miss most of them. They don't have it yet. They're exploding out of the water to get it, and they don't have it yet. So it takes training, but you have to stall until that fish starts to pull you a little bit. And then you got them. You catch almost all of them that way. There are times, look, I'm like everybody, man. When them fish blow up on it, I want them. And so sometimes I get a little anxious on the hook set and I miss a lot. Then I got to slow it down and I got to let them have it until my line gets tight. Then set the hook on them. Now I said nail weights. The other thing you can do. Oh, I did something on my computer here.
You're good. I still see
All
you.
right. The other thing you can do is you can put nail weights, and here I will put the nail weights in the two shoulder sides of the frog.
Oh, that's brilliant. I've not heard of that one, Frank.
So then you've got two nail weights on each side to keep the frog balanced. If you put it on one side, the frog's going to tip. So you put it on both sides. Now you're not interfering with where your hook's going to go and your frog runs nice and flat and stays flat.
I like that. Put what, a 16th ounce tungsten on either side?
It depends if it depends how windy it is,
Mm-hmm.
how fast you have to reel it in. And the other thing too is if your frogs are rolling on you a lot, you can put one in the butt section of the frog,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll keel it like this. It'll sit like this, and
Not affect your hookup ratio
and
at
not
all.
affect it at all, because that's if you get, sometimes you know how you get one that wants to flop on you
Yep.
all the time.
Yep.
It could be because you're not perfectly straight in it, because that screw lock can be tricky. So it could be that. So a little nail weight in the back end of the frog will help keel that bait. And that's really my frog fishing. I have a tendency to throw, um I don't throw bright white. I throw the milky white color. Um, this is about as froggy as it gets that I throw on the bait. This is
Yeah.
summer gill.
And you say that about as froggy as I get. They're called frogs, Frank, but what are
Right.
these? Whether you're throwing a hollow body or and I don't know if this is where you were going next with this, a hollow body or a soft body, what are they imitating actually? What do these fish in your mind think that they are attacking?
Okay. Now it could be a dying bait fish that's stuck on top of the grass. It could be a frog. Obviously, most of the time it is a frog. But on the leg
Buzzing
style
style.
baits, the
Mm-hmm.
buzzing style baits, it could be a fleeing shad, a bluegill
Bluegill.
trying to get away. It could be a lot of things.
Reaction bite. They don't even know what the hell it is. It's just something going
Right.
over their heads.
And you have to understand that that it's probably one of the best reaction baits. The bass are usually close to it. And when it goes ripping over their head, their predatory nature, they can't stand it, and they got to go get it. And
Uh-huh.
that's the beauty part about frog fishing, is that you could make a fish that's otherwise not in a chasing mood. You can make a fish bite a frog. That's why guys throw them all the time, because it puts fish in their boat when other things are not. Now, if the frog is the main pattern, you can't beat it, hands down. You
Mm-hmm.
can't beat it. And that's pretty much it. So my colors are really simple: June bug, black, something off white, and something bullfrogish.
Okay.
And that's it. Like I'll have, like it could be green pumpkin candy, something froggy in color, green pumpkin candy, straight green pumpkin.
Bluegill imitator.
Right, just something. But I don't go wild with my frogs. I mean, here, you see, that's not very wild.
What is that color? That is a very cool color.
It's awesome color. You know, you're gonna kill me. I forgot the name of it.
Hold on. I'll
Hold
pull
on.
it up.
I got it right here.
I got it. I'll pull it up.
My dang glasses, dude. I
It's
look
fine.
at
I
these
can pull it
things.
up.
Old Smoky is what it's called. Old Smoky. This is one of my favorite colors, by the way.
There it
Old
is right there.
Smoky.
That's it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, Old Smoky.
How would you describe that?
It's almost like a semi-translucent smoke color, but it's actually kind of solid looking. But this is a beautiful bait. It gives me it'll silhouette in the cloud cover, it'll silhouette in the sun. It has that frog appeal, but it also has a bait fish appeal to it. It's a, generally speaking, it's a really good all around color.
Okay, you talked about that you talked about your colors in the reeling style frogs, the hollow bodied frogs, Old Smoky. What else are you going to make sure if you're building a frog box you're going to have in the hollow body?
I'll have a bullfrog. I will
Okay.
absolutely have a real bullfrog color. And that's pretty much it. Black. I have black. I don't really have white, but I have black and bullfrog and Old Smoky in my
There's the
hollow
bullfrog.
body. Yeah, here I got a little baby bullfrog right there.
Yep. All right. I'm going to pull up a color that I know a lot of guys were pumped about when it came out. We might have talked about it on the show, and that would be the disco ball.
Yeah, that is 100% pure shad right there.
Okay, so that's why Jason Christie and all those guys love it when the water gets up in the bushes and the shad are spawning in the bushes, because that imitates a shad. But
yeah, that's pure shad, yeah.
In your neck of the woods and most of what you're imitating, you're going more off of a different forage base, which is why that's not a everyday color in your repertoire.
Right, it's not an everyday color in my frog box, but I'm not saying that I won't ever throw it. You know what I mean? It depends where I'm at and what the bass are doing, if I'm going to throw it or not. But like I said, you can't go wrong with these bullfrog black. You can't go wrong with it. But yeah, that disco ball got a lot of attention for the guys that live on those big shad lakes. And then it is deadly. It is absolutely deadly.
All right, are you going into any other tips and tricks? Because I have some questions on the hollow bodied, and I know guys do it differently, but I would love to know how you do a couple different things.
I do put rattles in them.
Okay.
I'll take the plastic jig rattle and just slide it in there where the hook comes through, and just slide it right in there. Just a little plastic jig rattle, and that's it. That's my biggest trick with them. Other than the legs, sometimes, like obviously, I haven't fished these ones because
it's a long trim tail.
Yeah, so I'll cut the legs down a little bit.
How much?
I don't take a lot off the legs, to be honest with you. I'll go like this, and then I'll just cut that. It's
so
about
a half an inch.
Yeah, it's about 3/4 maybe.
Not a big. Doesn't matter to you whether one's a little bit shorter than the other one, or you want them even, or
I want it to walk easy. If I'm having trouble getting the thing to walk, I consider those legs like a kite string.
Okay.
So I trim them up to get to make sure that my action is proper on them. Sometimes some of them will trim more, some won't. Depends if I got the rattle in them or don't. You know what I mean? The weight. I always before I trim it, I try it, and if it's not walking properly, then I start shortening them.
Hook wise, you started out talking about the hollow bodied, but you like the hook. There's some guys that will open up the hooks, other guys that'll bend them in. Do you leave the hook on that pad crasher as it is out of the package?
100%. I don't touch them because these hooks have the perfect bend in where they're not too much in. They're barely touching the bait body, but they do touch the bait body. And so what happens is if you bend them out, you're taking the weedless characteristic away from those hooks. Okay. They'll snag on everything. This bait, this frog here is probably perfectly designed. Just the way everything lays out, you can see they're angled up to a degree. But when you let the body go, the body's just barely, I'm going to see if I can show you this. The body's just barely against that hook. It's barely touches it. And this is a real soft bodied frog. And so if you bend those hooks up, it's just gonna hang on everything.
So that angle is key. If you're caught a pike that you had to winch it, rip the hook out, if you get it stuck in a piece of wood or something, you need to, and now all of a sudden everything's getting hung, you're getting chunks of grass on it, you need to take those pliers and make sure that you have that angle back to where you're still hooking up, but you're still weedless.
Correct. It's just got to touch the body. It's not pressing into the body. It's just touching the body. So if you move that, it's exposed. The hook's exposed. Where am I going here?
I got you.
When you move that, those hooks are exposed.
You said when it's the deal, it is the absolute deal. Run through in your mind for a hollow-bodied frog what the perfect scenario is as far as type of lake, vegetation, water color, time of the year, that type of stuff. Like the perfect.
I anytime from the spawn until the fall,
Oh, so it's a wide range of time that the frog is at play.
It's always in play anytime there's vegetation around. It's always in play. It's just a bait that you can't not have in your boat,
Mm-hmm.
because when it's on, it's on. And here, look, I've had days on Kentucky Lake when Kentucky Lake was really grass choked, where I caught them all day nonstop, whether the sun was shining or whether it was overcast and cloudy. I caught them all day on it. It was just happening. On the Potomac River, I was catching them on the toadstile baits, and then they got off of it, and I had to go to a buzzbait. For whatever the reason, it was the buzzbait became a player, but the frog bite was winding down, and you know it's winding down when you start the pattern, okay, and you start catching fish. I mean, once you figure out the grass they want to be in, if it's the broken stuff, if it's the mat edge, if it's on top of the broken mat, once you figure it out, you shouldn't have to hit 30 of them to get fish. It will be, there's going to be fish over there. There's going to be fish down there, and you run down there. If all of a sudden you're hitting 15 of these places and you're not catching fish anymore,
Mm-hmm.
that pattern's changing. It's not the deal anymore. So you always have to understand that the fish are going to let you know what's, when it's right and when it's not right. And that's just, honestly, that's just the nature of topwater fishing in anyway.
One of the most frustrating things about the hollow-bodied frog, when they get it, they get it. But when they miss it, you can have days where you're like, man, I should have had 18 pounds, and you come in with 1 3-pounder. They miss it. They're not getting it. They're swirling on it. Any tips? What do you do for follow-up baits? Can you change your cadence, your color, your size? What do you do when you're getting the bites, but they're not fully committing to it? Because I think that happens a lot when you're frog fishing.
It does. That's when I got my punch rod handy.
Okay.
It's right at my side. When I'm fishing the heavier vegetation, which is usually when they miss it the most.
Okay.
When I'm fishing the heavier vegetation and one poof and completely misses the frog, I'm my frog rod's down. I got my punch rod out and I go right to the hole that the bass just made. And 90% of the time I catch it. I'll tell you a funny story. I got a buddy of mine who is a frog addict. Okay, so anytime we go anywhere, he's
going to see if there's a frog bite.
He's going to catch one on one. So I said, they're not on the frog. He's like, how do you know? I said, I was here a couple days ago and they're not on the frog. Pick up your punching stick. He goes, I'm throwing the frog. I said, you throw that frog. And I just sat there just dunking. Every now and then I catch one and he's frogging and frogging. He gets one when I see the boil and he sets the hook and his frog goes flying 50 yards behind us. I take my punch stick and I go right in that hole. Whack, I catch him. I told him, I said, you just find every one for me. I'm good with that, dude. He was like my pointer. If you were pheasant hunting, he was my pointer. And he was getting so aggravated.
So the follow-up bait is key.
Yeah, the follow-up's key on that. Part of the problem is if they legitimately miss it, okay, they're having a hard time figuring out where it is through the mat. And that's how come they're legitimately missing it. It's not because their aim is off for the day. It's just parts of that mat might be too thick for them to get through. And by the time they get through, you've already moved the frog. And so they're missing it a lot. Okay. The other thing is, if you're setting the hook when you see the splash, you're taking it away from most of the bass before they ever even get it in their mouth. So you got to really train yourself not to do anything until your line starts to pull. And then you catch a lot more of them. You have better hook percentage that way.
Braid wise, I believe that when Aaron caught him on the baby bird pattern out at Havasu, he was throwing like 20 or 30 pound braid on it. Then you've 50. Because then you've got other guys who throw 60, 70, or 80. Where are you at in your braid? You said right in the middle, 50.
Yeah, 50, right in the middle.
Yep. Any special knot on that or just your typical braid knot?
Just typical braid knot. I actually,
Okay.
believe it or not, I tie a Palomar.
That's hard to beat it.
I can't
Stop
switch.
tying the Palomar when it stops working.
That's what I say, dude. If that knot fails me, um, more than one time a year, then I will
Mhm.
find a new knot. But I've had other knots not work out well.
Well done. Rod action. I know you mentioned it. Frog fishing. I feel like your rod action and being able to work the bait properly, set the hook, get the fish to the boat. What type of rod? I know you mentioned the model, but are you looking for a fast action? Are you looking for a lot of backbone? Are you looking for long? Are you looking for shorter? For a guy who wants to use something that's already in his arsenal, what's the best option for a frog rod?
I'm looking for a fast action rod.
Okay. That means the tip bends with a lot of backbone.
Correct. So it's medium heavy to heavy, but it's got to be fast. And if it's a heavy action, it's got to be extra fast because you need the softer tip. You're going to lose a lot of your walking action if that rod is like a broom
Bruce.
handle.
Yep.
You're not going to have it. And then the other thing is the bass, you're going to not permit the bass to take the bait because there's zero stretch in braid. And so if your rod doesn't flex when that bass takes the bait, because remember, bass don't have hands, they can't come up and grab the frog.
That'd be
That
weird if they did.
that'd be weird, but
I
they
hooked
got
him right in the thumb.
right. I got them in the forefinger.
They were grabbing it. They weren't eating it today. They were just coming up and just touching it.
Right. So
That would be so creepy. Half
it
the
would be
time they
so
eat it, and then
creepy.
half the time you just see a hand go, oh.
Yeah, dude, please. They'd flip us the finger a lot, I think. But yeah, so so the thing is that you have to have that the end of that rod has to give because the bass will suck the bait in. They'll hit it, suck it in, and they turn on it to go back. And if you wait for them to turn, you got them.
Yep.
If you set up too soon, you're taking it from them. So you have to remember that.
All right, I made a couple notes. I feel like we anything else on the hollow body before we wrap things up with that and then wrap things up with the reeling style soft plastic one. What do you call it? A plastisol?
Hey, plastisol,
A plastic, hard plastic. Anything else on the hollow body before we
No,
take
I'm
the
good.
Okay.
It's not complicated.
No, I like it.
It's not complicated technique. It's a very rewarding technique because everything's visual. It's one of the funnest ways to fish.
Yep.
Coming from a guy who would rather spend my time 2 miles offshore, for me to say that it means something because it's a fun way to fish.
All right. The reeling one, you said something that I made a note about. You said you can throw this anywhere you throw a buzzbait. When are you going to go with the reeling toad over a buzzbait? When is that more effective? Because I can think of a couple guys who have made careers in the Ozarks out of putting down the buzzbait and throwing the toad,
Mm-hmm.
and us going, wait, you don't throw a toad there? And they're like, okay. And they come in with 18 pounds every day. Most notably, James Watson on Table Rock.
Right, 100%. When it stops working, that's the best thing I can tell you. If I know I've got that bite range going,
Mm-hmm.
and those
You're
fish,
catching them on a buzzbait. You have been catching them on a buzzbait.
right,
You expect to catch them on a buzzbait.
correct. I'm throwing the toad style bait.
And they stop. They get off of the buzzbait. They're swirling it. They're not eating it. Something small has changed. That's when you're making the switch.
Correct. And vice versa. If I'm catching them on the toad style baits
Mm-hmm.
and that bite starts to wane, then I might need something that has a different sound, different commotion to it.
Super clear water. It seems like these toad style baits excel when something else might be a little bit too noisy. The draw power is in their subtleness.
The 100%, dude. That's the best. That's the best way you could put it right there. I've caught so many smallmouths doing this up north. It's disgusting.
Smallmouth.
It's disgusting.
Really?
Yes, it is disgusting how many smallmouth I catch doing this. It is so much fun because when they hit it, they are ferocious. The problem is they suck at it. They miss it a bunch of times before they get it.
Mm-hmm.
It's It's the most frustrating thing you'll ever do, but man alive, when you hook up, you hook up. And it is, and you catch some big ones doing it. I mean, some really big ones.
Now, will you ever put that toad on a buzzbait? Because that's the hottest
Mhm.
trend over the last 3 years.
Yeah, I do. I have them rigged with the toads on them, but to be honest with you, I throw a buzzbait with a swim bait on it
Okay.
more, and I have one that I have a real sparse skirt that I make. It's really sparse, and I'll put a 4-inch ringworm on it, make it real subtle.
And we have done buzzbait shows before. You can go back into the index and see the buzzbait shows. We've done grass shows before. You can go back and look at the grass shows.
Oh
The
yeah,
frog show kind of ties it all together. We may have dabbled in the frog world before, but I don't think we've done a full on show that
no,
kind
we
of
didn't.
differentiates the two.
We didn't go deep on it. The best frog day I ever had in my life, I was fishing with my buddy Kurt on the Mississippi River, and I don't know how many 20-pound limits in one day we caught, but it was on, and it was on. And I had a bruise the size of a softball on my rib cage because it got to the point where we were catching so many that I would just set the rod in my side and set the hook in it, and the rod would be in my side. And dude, I'm not kidding. It was a purple bruise about the size of a softball. And it was the best. It was the best, bar none, ever frog fishing day I've ever had in my life. And we caught both largemouth and smallmouth on them.
I'll also say this: there's a lot of day 4 listeners who might not have a vessel. They fish ponds. This is the time of the year where the beautiful thing is you can take one rod, you can hide one bait. There's a 95% chance you won't freaking lose it if it's a hollow body.
Right.
You can find access to golf course ponds, local ponds, backwater sloughs off of lakes that are inaccessible to boats, all sorts of different areas, and absolutely crush them from the bank on this thing.
There is no question about it. It's probably the best pond bait made, except for maybe.
They absolutely drill. I've caught 95% of my fish on a frog have been out of a pond and not on a lake. I've never weighed in a tournament fish on a hollow-bodied frog, Frank. Ever.
Really?
Ever. I've weighed in a lot of tournament fish on a
on these style.
On a buzz toad, both on and off of, by itself or not. But a hollow-bodied frog, I jumped one off 2 years ago at Ross Barnett that would have been the first one that I weighed in. And I throw it intermittently, but I've never weighed one in on it. But pond-wise, I've caught hundreds on it. And I love it because when you go to the pond, you don't have to take a bunch of stuff.
No, it's easy, man. One rod,
50-pound braid, one frog, you're golden.
The whole day, you're good to go. Yeah,
and they're ferocious when they come up on it. And they're the ponds that it's the only thing you can fish on them. Like you can't go there and throw a crankbait or a pop.
Oh no,
or because they're just covered.
They're choked. And the thing is think about it. Think about when you go to those ponds, because I was a pond junkie back in the day. When you walk around the bank, all you see is choo, 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 all them frogs jumping in the. It's unbelievable. It's a good pond bait.
The best way that I found to find these ponds in the area, and it's what I did when I was in college, is you get the Google Earth Pro. You load it up, and then you go to historical image data, and you find a picture of the neighborhoods or wherever from June, July, August, somewhere where there's vegetation. And then you start going around the subdivisions and looking at those ponds, and you can tell whether they're sterile, whether they're colored or whether they're covered with vegetation. And then you throw the frog rod in, you go, you see, are they public? Are they private? Is there available? Is there someone you can ask to do it? And I promise you, everyone that's watching or listening to this, you're within 20 minutes of a frog blow up.
Oh, 100%. Without a doubt, dude. It's so much fun too. It's quick and easy. If you're a pond hopper, it's quick and easy because you throw the rod in the vehicle. It's always in there. It doesn't require tons of terminal tackle. Nothing. You just got your frog and your frog rod, and that's it.
All right. Anything else, Uncle Frank, before we wrap up the frog version of day 4, number 120?
I think we're good, man. Matt.
Next week, we have an exciting show next week. We're going to go from the top
to the bottom.
What? That's called teamwork right there, Frank.
That's right. That's how it's done.
All right.
We're extending our playing field, boys and girls. We're extending our playing field next week.
All right. This has been day 4, number 120 with the man Frank Scalish. Tune in next week. Brush piles, right?
Brush piles
next week. Go out.
I'm going to show you how. We're also going to show you how to find them, which people don't talk about a lot, but I'll show you how to find the best ones.
Looking forward to it. We'll see you next week, everybody. Later.
Adios.